Welcome to Experiences of Insight. On today's episode, we are joined by Dan Levy from Adelaide, Australia. Dan is a human-centered design expert, sprint facilitator and coach, advisor and consultant, and principal at More Space for Light. On this episode, Dan shares with us some insights on being an entrepreneur, his journey as a creative, and discusses some of his passions and interests outside of work. We are very thankful and appreciative to have spoken with Dan, and without further ado, we present Dan Levy.
Can you hear us, Mr. Dan? Not yet.
Yeah, now I can hear you. Hello.
Hey.
Hey, welcome to my world.
It's a good world. I'm actually on vacation, so I created this situation behind me.
Oh, okay. I can't lift my computer up because it's pretty temperamental. It keeps dying, so I'm in a bit of a, hold on a sec. Let's try something here. That's better. Yeah, I'm in a bit of a MacBook catastrophe at the moment, or situation, however you want to define it. It's lovely to meet you, Lee. Lovely to meet you, David.
Absolutely.
Yes, you too, Dan. Very nice to meet you.
Yeah, I was kind of thrown off with the fact that you're from London and not from Australia. So I was trying to really triangulate in on your sense of humor, the origin story of that. I'm still, you still have me on it.
Okay, well, so that's my little kind of thing. It's kind of funny when I talk and people speak to me for the first time. They're expecting, "G'day, mate," but instead they get, "All right, mate, how are you?" And it just completely, I love the looks I get back.
I also had a different couple of initial questions that I wanted to ask you that were predicated on you either being from Adelaide or from Southern Australia. And when you mentioned that piece about London, I just caught it a couple of minutes ago, and I'm like, okay, we're going to freestyle this a little bit. I mean, I have a lot of friends that grew up in different parts of the Commonwealth, so I have a great appreciation for how, I think a lot of times us as Americans, we don't really, we just don't know a lot, and we're just dumb generally, or whatever, or we don't have a time or an understanding or maybe that much of a concentration early on in our experience and our learning, where we're not as aware as most of the other countries out there. And through my friends and over the years, like I said, developed a big respect for the Commonwealth and people's travels and journeys. So,
have you done much traveling yourself, David?
I have, yeah. Definitely. I grew up in Southern California, and I came to school when I was 17. And on the East Coast. And if you've been to the States, you know how vast that is. So it's a pretty big jump. And I would imagine like Australia as well, when you talk about going from Adelaide to other parts, there's a lot of different culture, some nuance, and, regardless, you get an opportunity to learn and understand where different people are coming from. And it's atypical to, in my example, where I grew up was a lot different than where I am now and where I went to school. So it was a really nice experience.
I'm trying to work out the background. Sorry, David. I get what's all those pictures in the background? What's going on?
That's, let's see if I can bring that in a little bit closer. It's actually, hold on one second. These are all Andy Warhol Polaroid.
Wow. So you're in New York, yeah?
Yes.
And did you like the way I totally avoided going deeper into what you just said in regards to your kind of your perception of Americans and that? I've intentionally sidestepped any kind of political banter that would alienate anybody. I try and stay as carbon neutral with that stuff.
I'm brutally honest about my limitations, and I let it hang out there. And but unfortunately, the current state of things, a lot of things have been said and communicated at the either through politics or in the news or press. And it definitely, let's just say we're in it's been painting us in a really bad picture the past couple of years.
Yeah, I'm just attached to my sound. These are my wife's headphones. Yeah, well, it's hard. I mean, there's a lot of nasty stuff going on in the world at the moment, and I've got to be honest with you. Being a Londoner, being an expat, I like being in. I was having this conversation this morning. I feel it's nice to be in the bubble of Adelaide as much as it isn't nice to be in the bubble of Adelaide in Australia. Like I've got to be careful what I say here, but
no, it's fine.
Okay. So I might pee off the people in Australia.
You know what?
We're so far.
I just view this as kind of like the freestyle jam, and if you say something, I probably will be editing the piece out about us saying that generally the perception of us as Americans is that if I just want to point to one thing, I mean, most people speak multiple languages as an example, just the fact. And here in the States, that's very uncommon. So
I think for us, just a quick one, because I'm messing around with my speaker. Can you actually hear me? You're picking me up?
I'm picking you up perfect.
Okay. I think sometimes it's out of necessity, especially in the UK and Europe. And UK is pretty bad. Your typical... people that are born and bred in the UK, they stay very localized. I'm sure many people are like that they don't move out their village. Growing up in East London, I was really lucky that it was such a melting pot. There was such a diversity of cultures. And I mean, you're spot on with the nuances of the different parts of Australia. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the diversity of culture, mm-hmm. I mean, especially it's not so prevalent here, and it's something that kind of does my head in a little bit with my kids because it's very generic to put it very bland. It can be, and I'm very used to being one of the only white kids in class and things like that, and just being so exposed to different cultures and that. And I loved it. I just love learning, and just like you said, I just get really into it. And that, that was part of my journey that before I got to Australia, going through all Asia and just experience new and different things. And I think that's so important. And, so just having that sense of perspective and being able to kind of just teach my kids that as well.
Let me ask you a question, and I'm just a heads up. I'm liking the way this is going, and it hits on a couple of our first kind of points that we generally try to discuss with our guests. Tell us a little bit, Dan, about your background. You mentioned you're from East London. Who's your football side? Is it West Ham? Is it no? Is it QPR? Who exactly is it? And tell us a little bit about what it was like being a child and growing up in East London, and some of the influences that you could look back upon at an early age.
Is football more sensitive than politics, or is football politics, or yeah?
Well, I'll give you a clue. My name's Dan Levy, and the club I follow, I'm the name. So I'm a Spurs fan. It's 2 weeks into the season. We're about to play our second game against Man City. I've been staring at my fantasy football team pretty much for the past 2 hours, and I can't take a couple of the Man City players out, and I can't captain Kane. And I know my friends in my league are already about 40 points ahead of me because I had a disastrous first week. So I'm already feeling it. I'm a massively passionate soccer fan, as most of my friends will tell you, to the degree where it really affects my week. And as a business owner, that's really bad. So I actually sometimes I'll skip watching the game until Tuesday, so it doesn't have an influence. I mean, do you follow sports at all? Like you, NFL, hockey? What's your big things?
Lee, what sports do you watching this day? Ultimate Fighting?
Definitely Ultimate Fighting. Not at all. I tend to follow people that follow sports. That's usually.
Oh, you're not a sports guy.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it's heavily influenced by the company that I keep. So if someone's a huge fan of this team, I will absolutely commit to being a super fan of that team.
Oh, good. You know what? You only need to know, I think it's 3 or 5 facts about anything. So if somebody says something, just Google it, get 5 facts, bang, you're away. It's like the 5 whys. straight into the conversation.
Yeah. I'm a Yankee fan, baseball.
Oh, yes.
And for football, I don't watch American football. It's just a little bit too boring for me, and not the energy is not right for me. For football, I hate to say it, but I'm a United fan.
You're Man United.
Yeah, we're also we're in a rebuilding period right now, as you're aware. So, and then the company I keep, it's my family exclusively. So. Hold on one second. I think I just so I was saying the company I keep, it's my family exclusively. And interestingly enough, we just got off a little bit, a pattern for the past month. We were recording, and each night we were watching the last 30 minutes of each stage of the Tour de France.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, super duper exciting. And my sons, I have 2 boys, they were really enjoying seeing that type of competition because it's so different and it shows a really interesting side of people and what people are capable of doing. So that was really nice to share that with them.
That's incredible. Yeah. And you get to see a bit of the world that you don't necessarily always see, do you? It's fascinating. Yeah. So we have the Tour Down Under in Adelaide, and
that's right.
It goes nuts here. I got to ask you, so you're a Yankees fan and you come from California.
Yeah. So how's that work? So what happened was I actually grew up a Dodgers fan. So they have like 2 leagues. Like imagine if they had like an A and a B of the Premier League. Yeah. And, maybe once a year the teams would overlap and play each other, but they were separate and distinct. And a lot of that is because of the history of how baseball was rolled out in the States. And I like that team. So it's in one league and the Yankees are in another league. And I've been here. I was talking to somebody about this. I've been in New York for more than half my life now. And so by default, I consider myself, when people ask me, are you Californian or a New Yorker? I say New York because I've been here so long and I have roots here. And when I moved here initially, I couldn't root for the Mets, which are the other New York team, because they're in the same league as the Dodgers. So I developed a liking for the Yankees, and it's going to sound horrible, but they are such a likable team given the fan base in the area locally here, and then the history and the stadium itself. Not that the Met Stadium doesn't have the same appeal. The fans and the atmosphere is really something to see and witness.
I've never been to a baseball match. I would love to go.
If you're ever here, I would love to take you.
But you know what? I was almost there. I was meant to be going to the Sprint conference next month in Colorado. I was going to stop in LA, and I got a good friend in New York who's from California who might listen to this and he's a Dodgers fan, and he might go, what? Dodgers to Yankees? But I want to come back. I love, my wife and I went to New York. I just love it over there. Like, it's so cool. Such a great city.
Yeah.
For lawn jarts, we have set in the garage.
What's that? Sorry?
If you're ever up for badminton or lawn jarts, we have a set in the garage. You can just pull on by our house.
Oh, beautiful! Don't offer me that, because
that was Lee humor. I just want to let you know it's Leeism.
It's not true.
We have it, but just to let you know, that's a underdog sport. That's something you play with your kids. It's one of those things. But just the offer still actually is.
I'd love to take you up on that, Lee, but please explain to me. I'm always looking for new dad tricks. Okay. Help me out.
Okay, let me just give you a quick one. So lawn jarts, I think, is outlawed. Probably some people died. And
it's Australia. It doesn't matter in Australia. Look, I'll tell you a quick story. I put it's so cold here at the moment. I've been wearing long johns to bed. My wife thinks I'm having a love affair with my long johns. Anyway, I put them on yesterday, and I felt this bite. And bear in mind, it's like 16, 13 degrees here at the moment. It's pretty rubbish. There was a wasp inside my long johns and stung me on the back of my leg. So in Australia, there really are no rules, like you can just get bitten fatally anywhere. So, sorry, Lee, go on.
Yeah, I know there's a number of venomous species in Australia.
Oh, yeah.
That. But I'll just real quick, I can't leave this this loose here. So lawn darts, if you ever played darts, obviously you throw a sharp small missile at a dartboard, so you compete to try to get a high score. So lawn darts is basically a dart that is larger, so it could do more damage, and then you give it to children to throw into a hoop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure that it's not legal now, but
yeah,
we do have a set. You can get them on eBay, and you're welcome to roll on over to our house and we'll play.
I'm up for that. Let's start an international tournament. I can be Australia and England. Bring my kids along. My little one's got an arm on him. I'll tell you what, he'll be a pitcher or a kicker, one of the two. So I reckon we could get some sort of international thing going on here. And what was the other thing, Lee? Sorry, we're not going to end up talking about digital technology.
No, not at all. I was going to. At first, I started off with badminton, but then I was thinking, that actually is a real sport. I'm just not good at it. So I shifted. I pivoted to lawn darts.
Oh, nice. Bit of business agility there. I love it. All right. So you asked me. Wait, let me circle back. So you asked me about my influences growing up.
Yeah, and also, what was it like growing up in East London when you were a young lad?
I got to say, it was pretty unspectacular. So I was just outside of London itself, so just in Stratford, just outside of Stratford, where they had the Olympics, and I was just like a normal kid growing up. I mean, I was into art, into media. I always thought I'd get into film, to be honest with you, or advertising. Loved comics. That was a big influence for me. Comics, it's still are. I mean,
it's nice to hear you say that. My oldest son Axel, who's 5, nice. I just started buying him some comics because he's just been demonstrating some reading skills, and I figured I just started feeding that a little bit. So it's really nice to hear that you're a fan of comics.
How old's your son?
My oldest is 5, and then the youngest just turned 2.
Wow, so you're a year behind me on both of your boys. So you're like me in baby jail.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How about you, Lee?
I have one daughter. She's 11. Yes.
Oh, so you're out the light. You're in the light, and must be.
Yeah, I no longer have to ask permission just to go to the grocery store as a grand vacation. I don't have to do that anymore.
Have you lost your cat burglar skills? The dad skills where you have to be very silent and.
Yes, I've lost all those. I'm totally de-skilled.
Oh dear. All right. So pretty normal. Used to was massively into kind of rock music. So growing up, I think just when I came out of uni, me and my buddies brought me on board, and they were running a record label. So I ran a record label for a while with those guys. My only motivation to run it was to get tickets to rock festivals, to get VIP, because I hated sleeping out with everybody else, and which worked. And that got to a point where it got too big and just kind of exploded in our faces. Ran studio in London, in Camden, and that was pretty amazing. But I think, I think life really began for me properly as an adult when I started traveling, seeing the world and seeing lots of new cultures and getting that experience and being away properly. Because I lived the other end of the country at university, but moving to Australia was a massive leap.
So tell us, we'll try to bring it back. I won't talk about.
I'm slowly helping you claw it back.
We're coming back. We're bringing it back. So tell us a little bit about your work, what you're doing.
Okay, so I keep saying okay. I know this all sounds terrible on a podcast where you say now and okay. When I practice my presentations, I always try not to say okay and now at the beginning, or so at the beginning of everything I say. Or I run an agency or a consultancy with corporate innovation and strategy consultancy called More Space for Light.
Mm-hmm.
We've been in existence for 3 years and 8 months, and it's exciting, exhilarating, exhausting, all the E's. You've got me on a Friday night where I'm at my most vulnerable before I have to boot up and be a full-time dad for the weekend and balance, 80% dad or 90% dad, 10% try and get all the stuff done I couldn't fit in during the week. Yeah.
And you just mentioned that you were in Melbourne last week. So how actively are you traveling to visit clients or lead workshops or meet with people? And I know you mentioned that you your life began when you started traveling. Has that been compromised, that feeling been compromised with the introduction of kids and more responsibilities? And how have you been able to manage that?
It's hard, isn't it? And just so you know, before I answer the question, I'm pausing because I'm giving you that opportunity if you want. So I'm not just rambling on as well in case you want to just go into a conversation.
Uh-huh.
It's hard. I've had to be I've made lots of mistakes running a business. I've never ran a business before. And I've had lots of epic wins. And over the last year, once we hit 3 years, I've had to be really strategic in the respect of I can only do so much. So I have to stay focused and make the right decisions. And the decisions I've been making have specifically been focused on gaining customers and gaining clients and building communities building our community in Melbourne. Melbourne's about an hour and a half away from us, so it isn't as local as Adelaide. But I really like Melbourne. It reminds me of back home. It's very similar looking and feeling to London. It's a 24-hour city, and the people there are just amazing. There's just some amazing companies over there. Not taking anything away from Adelaide, but to me, going back to Melbourne feels there's no glass ceiling there, and I like that. I like the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
What originally drew you to Australia? What how did that happen?
Gravity, I think. But I ended up. So I went travelling. I split up with my long-term girlfriend. I knew I was going to go travelling at some point, and ended up going through Asia. And I knew I was coming to Sydney. I was just going around Australia and just fell in love with the place. The first day I was here, I remember I was sitting out having a beer, looking at the Sydney Opera House because I was in Sydney for 7 years. And it was January 5th. And usually in London, in January, especially between the 1st to the 20th, everyone's out of money. Everyone's miserable. It's like 1 degree outside. It's not a fun place to be in the UK during that time. I'm sure people from the UK that are listening to this will hopefully empathise there and relate to that. And here I was in the sun having a beer. It's hot. It was amazing. It was everything I could ever imagine. And I'd only ever seen Australia on daytime soaps. I saw a picture of the Sydney Opera House in the creative magazine Creative Review. So that was my only ever experience. So this was like a whole new world. For the first year, I had to keep explaining to people back home that they have cars in Australia. They also have TV and cable, because people's understanding of what it was like living here was just so different, like so low. It was pretty amazing.
They think you lived out in the bush?
I haven't lived out in the bush. I've always lived in the city. So I got here, and after my mum said, stay, it's a good place to stay, I abandoned all my plans to travel and just decided I'm going to make a life. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to get back into design, and I'm going to figure things out. And it was more of, there wasn't really a long-term plan there. It was pretty much day to day to week to just figure out how you make it work.
I was looking at your background and some of your professional experiences, and you mentioned this earlier, some of the influences that you had around rock and roll and the work that you did in starting the record label, and always kind of been into ads and advertising. Your first couple of professional experiences all the way through Fox, you did some work more on the marketing and advertising side. Is that correct, in the first couple roles that you had out of uni? And then, how did you transition more into the work that you did at Fox and focusing more on maybe a different aspect of supporting the brand or helping their brand radiate?
So it's a good question, David. So when I I went almost backwards in my roles, in the respect of I came out of uni, I did a digital degree. I thought I was going to do film. I got into multimedia. You might remember Lingo, Flash, and all that. I was a terrible coder that could do graphic and design. I got to Australia and I was doing more and more print work. Originally, when I first got in, my first design job was with Lonsdale, the boxing brand.
I love their line.
Yeah, it's cool. So it was weird. I was designing T-shirts and seeing people wearing the stuff that I was designing.
It's huge.
And then going through working at a print house. And I got to Fox and joined their digital team. They took a bit of a chance with me because I'd spent so long in the print world to come into that digital space. And I think I was pretty lucky at the time I made that transition because it was before iPhone, it was before adaptive displays and responsive and all of that, the screen size thing and apps. So it was pretty straight HTML web stuff. And I transitioned more and more into the marketing and comm side of that because I was working at a broadcast network and social was coming in, and they had to change their mindset and the way they had a dialogue with their community, with their fans, with the people that followed them, because they had to start thinking about social media. Now, not many people knew about social media, and I didn't profess to be some sort of expert. However, I had an open enough mind to start exploring and being able to challenge and introduce new concepts. So I was very lucky at right time, right place.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's interesting way you express that is having a Benjamin Button type of career where you started off and went, kind of went in a reverse direction. That is interesting. Let me ask you a quick one before I forget. So tell me a little bit. I want to bring it back. I also want to talk about design in your work. So help me understand the design work you do in More Space for Light.
So our design work, 80% of our work now is in relation to human-centered design workshops, design sprints, more on the workshop side of things. Daniel Steelman calls it conversation designer. I wouldn't say I'm that, but I'm applying that kind of creativity now to workshops. The way I put together, I get the guys as well to help me out put together exercises and programs, and we dip in and out of things like Luma as well and use their tools. So the design aspect of it comes in the prototype and the polish in the brand and the way we actually treat More Space like a product itself. So I reckon that would be a lot of where our designs come from, and that's just because we've spent the last few months rebranding or enhancing the brand from where it was.
How long are your projects?
How long of our project? Oh gosh, they've got shorter and shorter. They've got shorter and shorter since the design aspect. We've got some clients and retainers where we come in and we consult. But to be honest with you, I prefer to come in and leave as quickly as possible. And the reason that is I'd rather be engaged and provide maximum value than be something like some entity in an organization that's bleeding out and not offering any value. So I like coming in for the projects. And at the same time, what does trouble me, I'd like to see the project launched. And it's a constant conflict of coming in, running a design sprint or a design program, or doing the UX or helping with a product strategy and setting up all the analytics and the optimization. But sometimes having to hand that over because it's kind of like your baby or you've helped them that far. I find that challenging.
Mm-hmm. As your focus, and I hear you because of the scale at which Crystal Cove runs. I don't have the luxury of being able to be there at all different points of the life cycle. and need to be very precise on how I spend my time. And I have also seen that it has the extra capacity that I'm able to build up is allowed me to focus on other types of projects and other types of business issues and clients and even across different sectors or industries. I'm interested to hear two things. Partners, who do you work with, and do you want to give a shout out to anybody to help you complement your offering? And not only that, but just give a shout out to the work they're doing. And is there anything out there on the horizon? You mentioned some of the rebranding work, and it's cool if you say, stay tuned, more to come. But is there anything out there that you could share with us that's new, that's helping you on the rebrand path?
Well, there's some things I can't talk about that are happening that when you said that question, David, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. But I just wanted to touch on what you said in terms of being precise. That's something I've learned because there's so much going on, you have to be so precise in terms of what you offer and the way you go to the market. And it's taken us so long to define our unique value proposition. So you'll see on our website, we don't profess to do that, specialize in full service of design. We're user experience, product strategy. Even that has its own nuances. And I think it's so important. In regards to partnering, so as you most probably you can see on our website, we're the Asia Pacific partner of the Design Sprint Academy. We're very proud of our partnership there. And we've been with those guys for about a year. Lee pressed me before to ask me, that makes sense because you're being a Londoner and being a partner, but the story there's a little bit different. Also, we're building partnerships up in Australia with other local consultancies, whether they're change management or organizational design, because we complement them. Plus, we have a partnership with a team that we use out of Asia for our development. And I have a long-standing relationship with somebody I work with in Sydney who's gone over there, started a business. And through those guys, we're able to bring them in on projects. And there's a few other people that I'm starting to bring in, especially as we've started to change the design sprint process to build out the actual prototype and testing part. Mm-hmm. We were very much inspired by, I think it's Tom Chi from Google. Yep. Spoke about the learning loop at the last sprint conference.
Yeah.
And we're constantly looking at things like this to influence us. And I'm going on a bit of a stream here, but we've just come back. The reason we went to Melbourne to see, and I'm more than happy to give this person a shout out because she's absolutely amazing. Her name's Dara Simkin. She heads up a company called Project Play, and she's affiliated with IDEO. And she ran a conference, as I said, called Project Play this week. And it was a really interesting event, and that's why we went there, to support her because she's a friend, and also because I was really curious to learn more about what she was doing. And my personal journey, is to go out to all these different types of niche design thinking, for instance, improv, serious play, and all these sort of things, and learn how I can bring them back and incorporate them into what we're doing, where we can actually, as opposed to them being and I've got to be careful again in terms of how I frame this, because some people are quite skeptical in terms of the business value or the short-term business value of having everybody play with Lego for the day, but how I can use these tools and these techniques and incorporate them into programs that can demonstrate outcomes as quickly and efficiently as possible to highlight the value of working in this way.
So it sounds like divergent learning and prototype thinking is where you're at right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that allows us to. That really satisfies my own personal yearning for a bit of actual tool development, like building stuff and getting on the tools and being able to stop at the prototype stage and hand it off. And once it gets that horrible stage of long burn, big app build projects, not having anything to do with that. Mm-hmm. But I really like the prototype because there's really no there's no ceiling there. You can really explore and learn.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And what kind of instruments do you have right behind you?
Well, my wife
Is it a bass? Is it a bass and a guitar?
There's 3 guitars over there. There used to be more guitars. I've sold 2. So when you become a dad, you start losing. Hopefully you bring it back. Give me some hope. You start losing all your hobbies. So I bought a Fender Strat, an Eric Clapton Blackie Fender Strat. You've got a Gibson Song. Gosh, I haven't opened it up so long. Songwriter, and an Ibanez my wife bought me. I've also got all my wife's.
We have the same one.
No, do you? That's my wife's. She teaches kinder music, and there's our digital piano, so she's a piano teacher as well. And these are our headphones, which she'll tell me off for using. And here's my motorbike helmet. John Veton from Design Sprint Academy, whenever we talk, because we talk during the evenings, he thinks I'm Jeff Bezos sitting here in my little Amazon 1.0 situation.
Cool.
This is the one corner of the house where I'm allowed to take things off of my desk, like no Lego. This is it's kind of meter by 40 centimeters.
So as far as your background in music, do you see a lot of connection points and fusion with how you improv with other people, or the discipline it takes to make music, the harmony aspect, playing with others, being creative? Do you see that as meshing well with design in your work now?
Absolutely. So I'd say I'm more... I was originally in fine art, and the only reason I got into digital was because my mum saw a documentary that had all these smack addicts in Hackney that were art students, and she was worried. And she said, "You best get yourself a real job." And I thought, computer design might be the way forward. And my dad, for years, he was a black cabbie, used to tell people that I worked for Pixar because that was his level of understanding. But in regards to the synergy with music, very much with patterns and system design. I'm a big believer in system design and how things fit together, and also in terms of creativity, just being able to kind of just being able to flow and having an open mindset. I think that's really important. I got another conversation I had today with somebody all about him. The chap. The chap mentioned something about competition, like we might be in competition down the road, and it really troubled me because that goes against everything I'm trying to build with More Space, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this. You just on your own path where you're not that fussed about it. There's plenty of work to go around. You'd rather collaborate than compete, and as soon as you start competing with people, you're just trying to win their race as opposed to win your own. So. Yeah, I think the creativity is a big part, and I think David and Lee, if you guys have made that transition, so I'm sorry if I don't know this already, but once you make that transition from design or creativity to strategy, sometimes it's really troublesome because you have a real you have a real challenge to switch between creativity and strategy, because one can be so dry and the other so much more dynamic and interesting. And it's really, sometimes you kind of feel like you have to handhold both of them, otherwise you end up in this Six Sigma world, and you don't want to be there because it's.
On that point, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because the type of work that we do, I find us straddling both on the advisory side, where we might be talking to people leveraging, as you mentioned, some of the tools that we have acquired and formulated and packaged into our go-to-market strategy, and then the more dry execution on the consulting side. I see that quite a bit. But, I think when you look at like the Sprint book, for example, and the methodology that's outlined, and even if you break it down into the checklist and then you adapt some portion of that, and you, like you said, you package it, and that's what you go and talk to clients, a subset of clients about. I think it kind of increases your chances for success. And one of the things that you mentioned, similarly, I have different methodologies. Like I was talking to Lee about some certification that I'm going for to help on that execution side of the consulting business. I'm a hack musician myself, and I'm also a dad. And you kind of have to check your ego at the door on a daily basis. And it's interesting to hear another person that loves prototyping and trying things out and maybe doesn't take themselves that serious and isn't afraid to fail. It sounds like you're one of those people that are cut from that kind of, same stone. Was wondering, and I'm sorry to try to squeeze this in here, but I'm interested to hear. It sounds like you've had a lot of journeys and a lot of interesting commercial experiences and personal experiences. Tell us about a failure that is, tell us about a big failure that was very pivotal for you, and how did you respond to it, and what was the outcome?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, a big failure. So I big failure. A big failure would also mean it means something to me. So I wouldn't say it was a big failure, but I could refer to something that was pivotal on my whole life, and that would be so I've lost my mum and I've lost my dad, and I lost my dad a few years ago to cancer.
Sorry,
and that and I lost my mum a few years before that. This was both times after I moved to Australia, both, and my brother's out here now as well. And I guess that would be the pivotal moment for me, is losing your parents and realizing that all this serious stuff
it's not there.
So it's really, really insignificant.
Yeah.
And also my wife working in before she became full-time mum and teacher, working as a radiotherapist. Like you've really got to embrace that kind of play, not take yourself too seriously, just like you said, David. And a lot of what you do, and I'd imagine, especially the consulting part of it, it is to some degree a Hail Mary. Like you're basing a lot of your strategy on people, and people are unpredictable. Yeah. And creativity is the juice, and you've got to leverage that and utilize that to help bring clients on the journey, because otherwise it becomes too black and white. You can't always win. So in terms of pivotal, I'd say losing parents, growing up very quickly, and having to take responsibility, and also being mature enough to be light in regards to what I'm doing, and not take myself too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
That was a bit deep, but a bit shallow. So,
I love it. I mean, Lee will probably tell you that I always tend to fall back on those kind of maybe human questions a little bit more than the technical ones, but I love the human element, and I love the experience in the story.
Well, let me tell you guys another. So, More Space for Light. I got told that I should put this on my website, but I refused to, because I'd rather tell it to people in person. So More Space for Light, the name comes from my now 6-year-old son. So I was going for a bit of have you heard of a chap called Vince Frost? Vince Frost, he wrote a book called Design Your Life. Somebody else wrote something called Design Your Life as well. But Vince Frost, Frost Collective, he's a Pommy guy, moved from England over to Sydney. Yep. Really look up to what he does. He does some amazing work with typography and design. These guys are just terrific. And around that time, I think I read that book, and it had and my dad passed and all that, and it had a real profound effect on me. And I knew I was going to do this. I knew I was going to make that leap. And I was looking for all, when you guys know, when you're looking to do something, you look for any excuse. You say, oh, well, that nudged me, and that nudged me, and this nudged me. And coming from that kind of design world, as opposed to starting a business with a business model or a business plan, I actually started with a name, and the name came from my son. So one night I was home, and I work long hours. I was actually working when we were having our banter on LinkedIn, and we were putting my son to bed. He's 3 years old, and he said, "Mummy, I want more space for light."
Oh, wow.
And I said to my wife, I was like, "What does that mean?" And she turned around to me and she said, "Well, he wants more time to play. He wants more time to read. He's not ready for bed." And I was like, that is it. That's what I want. I want more space for light. And everything fell into place from there. And from that name, it's almost been an anchor to become a mantra. So, say for instance, we got called to run a workshop around my birthday next month. However, I've already got family thing planned. More space for light, more space for light. It's always have to make the right decision, and that's the mantra, and that's something our clients and partners really like, because we bring that aspect, and that's really stand by that principle of that simplicity and bringing that light to other people.
That name actually resonated with me the first time I heard it. I thought, wow, that really makes sense. And another thing that you said in regards to being more serious, and I think the more serious you are, the less seriously you are received, for sure. And that's a really ironic situation that it takes a long time and sometimes never to fully understand. I think you've cracked that code.
Oh, I'm trying. You know, I do you listen to people like Product Breakfast Club and Jonathan Courtney? And,
yeah.
I mean that guy is just. I really respect that guy. He's really nailed it. I'd imagine how transparent. I imagine like you see just the top of the iceberg of what's going on, but he really is. The way he's built his profile and stayed consistent in terms of his public profile and how he talks, and not really changing throughout the last few years, has been really interesting, and has been a big inspiration for me as a business leader. And also just seeing that and seeing how his focus and his philosophy have had a real big impact on me personally and professionally.
What's next for? I kind of asked this earlier, and I guess you couldn't really talk about some of the things that are on the horizon for More Space for Light. You know, one of the things that I think you should put the story or a little blurb out there, however you deem it most appropriate. I think that makes total sense, and I think based off of how Lee and I love the name myself. And if you could condense that and find a way to communicate that, I look at that as something that could help people like the story even more, or want to peel back the layers of the onion or find out more maybe.
Well, it would stop us ranking for light fittings and light globes in SEO. Guys. Thank you. How about yourself? So tell me, like, I know I'm not meant to ask. I always try and assume the role of being interviewed, but tell me about your practice and how we cross over.
Lee?
Okay, so we'll cross over. Here we go. So I, of course, work for IBM.
Yeah, I see.
A rather large company. And what I do is I work in a very small internal design agency, and we do transformation for IBM internal tools for the most part. What I've recently, I've gone through transformation myself. The latest thing that I'm into, of course, is design sprints. So that's basically all I do now. And what I'm trying to do is teach other people with inside IBM how to sprint, how to have that mindset and make use of the methodologies. And I take all, as you said, Jonathan Courtney and all these other folks and tools for collaborating, like Mural, etc. I listen to thought leaders, experts, and I'm always trying to understand what is the best way to do that, especially with a globally diverse organization. So I try to scale it. And so I scale it. I give the mindset to others as much as I can. I try to give it away. But overall, I am into transformation, and design sprints is my tool of choice to do that.
Can I ask how, sorry, David, I was going to ask you next, but I'm really curious, and I think this is a big question on everyone's mind. How difficult or how much of a challenge have you found bringing that program into IBM? Because they have their own methodology, don't they?
We do. So we have enterprise design thinking. Thank you for asking about that. I was trying not to oversell it. So we have enterprise design thinking, and at last count, we have for any one company, we probably have more designers than just about anyone. We have in the thousands and thousands. It's big, and we have, for the articles, have been working to scale design thinking as aggressively as anyone. So obviously that's a very useful discipline. And how I marry those two things as far as enterprise design thinking and design sprints. One, I infuse enterprise design thinking into a design sprint. So there are cases where we'll quote unquote flex sprint. And that's where, so basically instead of doing a big sprint, a 5-day sprint, we'll want to get together and say, well, we've got 3 hours. We'll have the decider for 3 hours. How are we going to do it? And I will go through the enterprise design thinking components and I'll draw them in. Sometimes it's more for observing and reflecting. Sometimes it's actually for the making. And sometimes I'll just do the entire classic original sprint components. And I also rely on the leadership and inspiration from Google and their website and you, Dan, and that's sorry, I'm going long here. So that's another reason why I network so actively is because every time I do that, I learn something new. I get a new tool. I find a different way to phrase things. I find a different way to energize and excite people. I draw from that energy because a big component of facilitation is making energy and making that space for light. And you have to have confidence and you have to be highly practiced. And it's not something you can generate from yourself. You have to draw from the energy of others. So that's why I network so hard. That's why I try to look to all aspects of creativity, facilitation, and methods and conversation design, as you said. And that's my way. And I think that new openness that IBM is trying to create is something I can help with. That's where I'm coming from.
Just on that, it's worth checking out Douglas Ferguson from Voltage Control. He's just, I was very lucky. He surprised me the other day by sending me a draft of his book to check. And I think he caught me at the best possible time because my wife was in hospital and I had the day there and and I basically read the whole book in a few hours. And by the time he'd woken up because of the time difference, I'd already provided him back all these alts and changes that I noticed. So I recommend reading that book, but he's just, I'll give him a plug. I don't mind doing that. But also, so did you find, though, did people roll their eyes when you brought design sprints into IBM? Like they were like, oh, another thing, or we've already got our toolkit. How did you overcome that challenge?
I'm still doing that. And I'll just say real quick, I want to, so I'm meeting Douglas next week for lunch. So this is kind of fun.
I'll send him my love.
I'll give him a huge hug. But yeah, absolutely. It's happening today. And I always have to be able to tell the story and defend the value of it. But I think what's most important is in considering design sprints and having a cross-discipline team that is laser focused on producing something of value is the right way. You can call it a design sprint. You can call it anything. But that's in practice what it is. And that's what everyone needs. Everyone needs to be super focused. You have to find a way to break down the psychological safety, make everyone feel loved and listened to and able to contribute. So absolutely, that's something I continue to do. But I think it delivers such amazing results that you can only ignore it for so long. After you deliver results repeatedly, this is not a fluke. It happened again. We're able to bring people together and create something that would not have been created otherwise. People are forced to pay attention, even the people that originally may not have been as interested. But I do infuse enterprise design thinking. I use enterprise design thinking for the pre-work. I use it for the post-work, for all types of work. And I just use all the tools available to me. And as I get more experience, I'm able to draw upon them in the moment they're most needed. That is what experience brings and yields, and that's what confidence through doing and just constantly being in a state of practice and learning and reaching out to people. That is the right move to try to understand and listen to people as much as possible.
Well, we're very lucky in the the community that has been built around the design sprint program itself, because everyone seems really cool, everyone's really open. It is kind of open source anyway. I mean, it was open source when Jake put it in the book, and everyone's embraced it in their own fashion. Sorry, David, I've got another question. I've never had Lee on the phone before, so I'm just gonna take advantage of him for a couple more minutes. So when you, I understand the pre-work because the guys at Design Sprint Academy, and as well as Jay over in New York, have come up with the problem framing, which everyone's really, everyone's had a stab at their own versions of it. It's not new, it's a maximum value. I found that to my folly that you have to have some sort of rigor going into the sprint itself. How about the post work? Because I think that's something that Douglas tackles in his book. How have you found that? Like, because often, getting people to realize that the design sprint itself is just a learning process. It isn't the whole program. It's just the micro, not the macro.
Yeah.
What do you do? Can you give us some examples of?
Okay. So first of all, I want to say, Stefan, he's the CEO of Sprint Switzerland, or I may have. Okay.
I've got his 3-month thing. I'm actually, I'm actually at the moment, I'm dissecting it because we've got our own similar kind of thing. And sorry, Stefan.
I like where he's going there. Is try to put it all together. And I think everyone is doing an experiment to try to figure it out. Everyone's doing an experiment, like Robert Scrobe. He's doing experiments for running virtual design sprints. I think it probably comes down to the unique culture that folks have, the unique teams that they have, that really defines after the post-sprint activity and how to get post-sprint success. I know with some of the names you just mentioned, code sprints are that was one way of thinking about it. When it's done, you bring the technology folks, the creative technologists into a room, and then you say, well, and hopefully they were a part of the sprint, but you after it, you have a very clear and sober conversation on this is the technology that's available. When we consider the time frame and the budget, this is what's possible. I think those gyrations are essential. And as I said, I think it has a lot to do with the very unique way of doing. For us, I think it's important to involve folks, technical people, and the people that are the makers in the design sprint, because we know from the psychological component that people support the things that they create. People support a world they create together.
Skin in the game, it's called.
Yeah. Okay. I'm ripping off a bunch of famous people as we go, but that is true. You need to you need to be generous with your idea. And this is another thing I've said before. The idea is easy. You have to equal the quality of your idea with your hustle. So you really need to give it away for the most part, and then invite the smart people to sort it out, because you're only going to be successful if they join in. It's a lot of work. And it takes some heavy lifting. So we bring those technology people in at the beginning, literally as soon as I hear about something and I think it's going to be real. Once it gets beyond the twinkle in someone's eye, and maybe even right then, we will send notes out to technology people saying, "What do you think of this? Can you join? Is this something that can stand by itself?" We bring them in. And then as we go, we have the open conversation of what it's going to take, and then after we have those what I would call code sprints, and we also, I think I'm going to finish here. I feel it coming. We also bring in the executives as much as possible, because you can create and I think I've said this before as well. You can create the most amazing thing that will never get built, and that's so painful. So the funders, not to be confused with Thunder, the funder people are really important, and you also need to make sure that you are hacking growth. Executives have a trajectory of where the business is going to go. Your idea needs to support and facilitate that. You need to make it look like it's their idea. So many times it is, but it really needs to just fit right in there. It has to be tucked. if you have a rub, if there's friction with your idea and your implementation, it will never, get to orbit.
Get to orbit.
The escape velocity will never be reached. So that's my approach.
Cool. That's amazing. Thank you so much for being generous. So I've almost taken, I kind of hold the tech guys back as long as possible. And the reason, because I try and, so we've adapted some different frameworks, kind of like the importance versus difficulty. So once we start getting ideas teased out, so we've been using our design sprint intro as the first stage in the design sprint process. So we run this design sprint intro that I created, 90-minute workshop. It's low bar. It's kind of like the lightning decision jam. It's like my version of lightning decision jam. And the purpose of it is just to get the ideas and show the value of it. And we take those ideas and we put them through this matrix and share them out, and then get people to rank them. And then from there, we can work out what aligns to the business objectives. And then we can start bringing in what's feasible, viable, getting those business models down to make sure that from you'd appreciate this at IBM. And I'm sure, David, in your consultancy as well, when you're bringing in innovation, that often we talk about the user experience and the customer experience, but we don't really think about the employee experience and whether the business has the capabilities and the resources to be able to support these wild and crazy ideas. They might have the tech team and they might have, sometimes they don't even have the infrastructure. So what we've been finding is that the business model canvas and the customer proposition canvas and things like that, where we can start tapping in, I think not from such a practical point of view, how you actually bring the tech team in, but more from a strategic point of view, how we can support this if this is a thing we're going to do. So that could be a change management program, anything like that. And then once we've got a plan for that, we can start saying, okay, we're ready to commit as a business. We've de-risked this to as much as we can, where this isn't a Hail Mary. This is like, we can see a flight plan here and then move on to the next thing. So a little bit nuanced.
One mini phrase I just want to throw in is we have a fixation on non-self. Like, we're always trying to identify, this isn't me, or this isn't mine, or this isn't my area. Yeah. And that's right. And we always want it to be tidy. And I think we all need to, and I think you are, but for everyone, I think everyone needs to constantly not be so fixated. This is not my domain. This is not my area. This doesn't fit exactly. And be open to a passive creative existence where everything is coming in, everything's coming out, every day is a prototype. That's something we say at IBM. I think that's the way.
Also, as you touched on what you just said, it's also a game. You've got to know how to play the game to some degree. But let me give listeners and yourselves, if you don't know this, there's a great tool out Luma called Stakeholder Map. You can look it up. It's not like the thing from Game Storming where you put things in 4 quadrants. It's actually a tool for mapping out an org chart in context of how relationships work and in context of their needs. So it's almost like jobs to be done with a visual map, a network of people. Really handy for figuring out when you're creating those stacked value propositions about who needs to be involved, what their wants and needs are, and how big their influence. I really recommend it. We seem to be doing more of these because we've really seen the value of this tool. David, let me ask you a question.
Sure. Same question or different question?
The same.
Okay. It's interesting. My experience was a little bit different than yours, as well as Lee's. I came out of school and I cut my teeth in the banking and financial services space. So before I knew it, I was setting up platforms, both on the operational side, on the business side, and then also from the technology perspective. And without knowing something, talk about like living a life in a silo. You're executing and you're doing things and you're very mindful of cost and people's time and working with people and what needs to be done, what levers or knobs need to be focused on to get people to come to the table and execute. And in that type of environment, you get confronted with some very interesting personalities, some good, some bad. And you're there, it's very task oriented. And, I was one of these people that I looked at each one of these experiences and I said, if I had to do it over, if I was a sponsor or a decision maker, I would not respond to people that way. Or maybe there was something I witnessed that wasn't. I thought about it and I constantly think about this. What could have been done better to have a better experience, to deliver something, execute faster, or to be able to demonstrate results in a more timely manner. And I then, after I got out of the banking and financial services space, I started working in business consulting. And again, the flip side to that is I'm there listening to what clients are focusing on or what they think the business issue is, and helping them find, achieve a desired outcome in as fast as possible time, and do it being very mindful to cost and all of that, and still focusing on the banking and financial services space. And also kind of having a lot of the similar feelings about the people and how we were working together, and just things weren't aligning as well as I was hoping for in the experience that I was kind of witnessing and seeing. And when I talk to people, when we have something and we release something and or hand something over to production in the BAU team, because my level of engagement was very much from initiation and planning, and even into some of the ideation all the way through to go live. Yep. And so I had the opportunity for many years to do some really interesting work for some pretty large clients. And it was still a very unfulfilling kind of experience. And around 2016, I got an opportunity, this is a separate discussion, but to read the sprint book. To read the sprint book, and literally I was told that I had to be someplace in a couple of days and have a team ready to conduct a design sprint, just kind of on the fly. And with that, come up with some very crude wireframes. And also because of the level that I was at within the organization, hopefully there was a chance for some pull through revenue coming off the back end of that. And long story short, we were able to mobilize, and maybe it's just the type of person I am. I just kind of took it on my shoulders and tried to get everybody organized and very mindful of what needed to be done when, from a sequencing perspective. And we did it, and kind of also part of me not being afraid to fail and just try things. And I think that sincerity and honesty with the customer kind of came through. And it was a pretty large regional bank here in the States. And from that experience, we were able to gain alignment at all different levels of the organization. And they were able to see deliverables, which at the end of the day, from a client perspective, are you being efficient? Are you working smart? Are you being mindful of my resources time? We condensed our first sprint from 5 days down to 2. The first go. So that's, you would imagine, that's pretty crazy.
Did you have lunch?
And so it was a pretty interesting experience. And from that, I think what I was thinking was that, oh my gosh, here's a chance for me now to do this. People come out of these experiences with better feelings generally about what they've accomplished. There's total alignment. And with a little bit more time, maybe on the back end of the sprint, we really could have something closer to a more high fidelity prototype. And so the difference between myself and some of the other people that are out there is going back to my management consultancy experience in my work in execution, I draw from little pieces of methodologies, like more formal traditional means of execution or methodology and approaches, whether it's waterfall or agile. And I've been involved in all different aspects of the life cycle and delivery. And so I look at the design sprint as like one little tool or a lightning decision jam that certain elements or components can help me have a discussion with somebody that has budget to spend or wants to talk about their brand or talk about a business issue that they're trying to address. And depending on how much time or where the conversation is or how it's taking place or how it's unfolding, I'll introduce different pieces of that to have a conversation with people, to align with people in a short period of time. And now that I'm running my own company for the past 2 years as Crystal Cove Consulting, hopefully getting a chance to come back and have another discussion with people and to maybe sell some business or maybe get an introduction to somebody within an organization in a different area. Believe it or not, I was recently working on selling a piece of strategy for a banking and financial services firm. And I had this expertise and this skill set around facilitation. And they were interested to see how I could help them. It was one piece about selling this consulting services engagement, but also what can be done within our organization for how, we release products organizationally. Where could we sprinkle some of that thinking and some of those methods and approaches into our existing organizations? So that's the stuff that kind of keeps me going. I'm not so hard and fast on it has to be these steps or you have to be. I've literally been forced throughout my career to adapt and learn and absorb and take in all this stuff and then digest it and apply it. So that's the way I tend to operate and go through the world.
That's really interesting. I can relate to that, especially the atomization of the different activities.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. You get that level of fluidity with the way you can use the program and understand the why and the value of the tools, that you're able to take them out of the context that everybody sees them in sprint and start to repurpose them. So interestingly enough, we're in the middle of a design sprint at the moment with a not-for-profit, and this is the most, I almost cried at the end of our problem framing. I actually said to the not-for-profit, this is why I get up every day, being able to actually solve a challenge that will make a real difference. It's real significant. It's a company that helps kids and their families that are suffering with cancer and helps educate them. And what we're doing a design sprint around is the actual program that they take into schools. So they have this puppet show, and they're using the design sprint to look at how they can approach that and reframe it and bring it in from an educational standpoint and tackle some a little bit more serious issues that they might have shied away from. Now, I know the purists out there will say, Dan, you've got to focus on a design sprint. However, we're very much at that exploration stage on what we're going to utilize and what we're going to focus on. So we've done the problem framing, so we know what it is, the challenge at a broader sense. And I'm going to actually, I've got to map out the whole design sprint. Now, I don't have to, but I want to, because I don't believe the tools in the design sprint will effectively help the client get to the outcome they need, because the tools are very much suited more to a product, not something as expansive as a player or a program. Now, people will disagree with me, obviously, but I can't see, for instance, how a solution sketch will translate across to, being able to demonstrate a part of a script or something like that. It won't have enough information. So at the moment, what's keeping me up at night, I never had to approach a design sprint in this way. So at the moment, you can see I'm scratching my head, because even talking about it, I'm stressing how we're going to apply the principles of each stage or the desired outcomes from each section of the sprint to get where we need. And that, for me, every time I approach a design sprint, especially that first day, I'm up all night the night before, because I know you kind of say to yourself the mantra of trust the process. But sometimes, you're going in as much prep as you've done, which is not as much prep as, especially in the financial and consulting world, that you'd be used to in regards to having these big lengthy docs and that. You are still going in blind.
The folks at IDEO refer to it as running towards ambiguity, and they say, it's moments where I feel most nervous. That's usually where there's the most to gain, and that's the best. That's a signal. That's an indicator that something amazing is about to happen.
Yeah.
But it's really important as well that the people within your workshop share that attitude, because what I've found is, as a facilitator, and I try and see as many different types of examples of facilitation as I can, and I've seen really bad examples of facilitation where the facilitator assumes a role as expert and they won't take on questions, and they stress when things aren't going to their agenda. And I very much set expectations as early as I can, because I'm used to wading in the shit. I'm used to the messiness of design, and I embrace the messiness of design, just like the chaos of life and nature and all of that. And I very much impart on people that are part of the team that it is going to be a journey and it's not going to be comfortable. Now, John and Dana have a map they refer to that has miserable and happy people on it. But the map's great, but you can really see the tension in the room when people look at you and they're like, well, what are we doing next? And you're like, well, we've just taken a left turn here.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure with what I've spent the last week preparing is going to get us to our outcome. Just let me go and make myself a cup of tea and I can help you there. But, you know, like, I think that's really important, I guess, to impart that mindset on the people that you're working with, and everybody's sharing that philosophy.
Sometimes it's referred to as team IQ or group IQ when you have a high degree of matching between the people who are speaking. When a couple people try to corner the market on speaking, the group or room IQ goes down. And I would align that in an analogous fashion to sprints. How can you raise sprint IQ? Well, you can raise sprint IQ by ensuring there's a high degree of matching and exchange. Everyone has the opportunity, and also you could run a little on-the-spot psychographic research and figure out who are the quiet ones, and then find a way to draw them in to understand where they are and what they're thinking.
Yeah, an interesting thing that I've discovered in the last 6 months, and obviously when you discover things, you kind of slap your head because you're like, oh, that was right in front of me, is liberating structures. And I didn't really understand liberating structures, and I was lucky enough, one of the conferences I spoke at, some chap out of Sydney did a talk on liberating structures, and there was a few consultants I knew in the room that were familiar with it, and I find that a really interesting methodology, and it's something that I'm trying to figure out how I can bring in, because again, that's almost a mindset for people in the room, that they have to accept that you're not going to converge, you're just going to diverge for 3 hours. You've really got to pick your audience, because a lot of companies that invest in design sprints, like that's why I was really curious asking you how IBM have embraced it. It is a whole new way of working. They're used to outputs, not necessarily outcomes. They want something that they can show their wife in the shower, which is an iPad app, which might not provide any ROI, might not, and they'll most probably change it when their secretarial, whatever it is, loses their login details and they need a new app, or they need it. But we deal in a lot more of a complex area, and I think you said it before, David, in regards to a specific area of that value chain, which is the problem, which is the strategy, and embracing that problem to be able to help smooth out and de-risk as much as possible. And for clients, that exchange can sometimes be a little bit difficult because they're so used to having something finished. Yeah. Rant finished. Sorry, you'll get me. Soon. I'll get more and more loose. So I'll go get some gin in a minute. Cause
you and me both.
I'm a wine cooler man.
The wine cooler man. Hey.
No, sorry. That was it. My inside.
So I'm letting you guys drive the conversation. Is there any other kind of things that you'd like to touch on? And like anything?
I have one.
Go for it.
So with all this going on personally and professionally, what, aside from I see the guitars and the music, what else do you like to do in your downtime? What do you do for fun?
I don't have downtime. As my old friends would say that I used to see. I ride motorbikes. I love them. So my dad gave me that gift. when he passed, he gave that to my brother and myself. He had a Harley Davidson. We pretty much packed up everything. And the only thing we brought across to Australia, apart from a box of photos of my comics, was a Harley Davidson 2008 heritage Softail. And I learned that was actually a big moment, which I didn't speak about, because I think I'm turned 40 next month, so I would have been about 36, 37 when Dad passed and bought his motorbike. So I learned how to ride a motorbike really late on. And I remember before starting Moorespace, I had this crappy little 500cc. It wasn't crappy, but it wasn't like a big thing. And I was working up to the Harley, and the long-term goal was to ride the Harley back, or ride it across country. I had to get it shipped to Melbourne, long story, but I had to ride it back. And I remember I'd only ever really been round the block on the bike or into the city, which was 20 minutes away. And I was going on this big trip with my buddies, and they left without me because for whatever happened, I got left behind. And I remember I got to the edge of the city, the edge of Adelaide, and I was ringing the guy's wife, and I didn't know where I was going. And beyond the city, it's just motorway. So you can imagine Australia, it's like Mad Max. You've got cities, then you've got nothing. Well, you've got bush and stuff. And I remember I was like, oh my God, I'm going to take this motorbike, which is used to going 60 kilometers an hour on a highway, which is 110 kilometers an hour, just with a backpack on it. And that was it. Like, once I'd done that, there was nothing I couldn't achieve. Like, that was it. So, and that, in terms of hobby and joy, that's been like such a great release. Apart from that, downtime's being a dad. Every waking, living moment I can be a dad and be plugged back into my family's life. I'm really, really selfish in respect, or not selfish, I don't think that's the correct word, but you guys, especially yourself, David, running your own agency, at the weekend, I don't want to see anybody else. I just want to spend the time with my boys and my wife, and just make up for that time that I miss, because you pretty much, as running your own thing, nobody tells you this. Gary Vaynerchuk's right. It's tough. You don't see your mind's somewhere else all the time. Yeah. So being able to kind of do your best to put this device away and
and going back, and I don't mean to take that much more of your time, but one thing going back to the Product Breakfast Club crew and Jake Knapp, again, when I read that, it's almost like you were saying something, you get confronted by some idea and it smacks you on the head and you're like, oh, but of course. But whether it's the Sprint book or Make Time, like that whole kind of ethos and kind of people that are sharing stories or time hacks around what you can do to free up that. And, some of these people on the journey are starting families, and that's a priority for them. I'm very receptive. They're pitching to the right audience here, and I'm absorbing that and trying to figure out how to do that with my life, because I have some of those points that are so valuable to me that I want to make these little hacks or changes so that I can keep doing what I want. And you're absolutely right. I love the Product Breakfast Club episodes where Jonathan's talking about some of the decisions that haven't really been positive for the business and some of the lessons he's learned from those. I hear that and I feel it, and I appreciate that human side of them communicating that, and you as well sharing those sentiments with us. It's been really nice to spend time talking to you today, Dan.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And it just touching on that point, it is tough. John, the guy, Jonathan at AJ's, he's had that head start, and now he's got a kid, and they're just going into a really good phase for the business now that he seems to have a handle on it from the outside. But as you know, 2 years deep, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, I mean, your wife's in it, and you come home with your stresses, and really you're living 2 separate lives. So my wife's in bed at the moment with my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old, because she knows I'm late, obviously, in the boys' bed tonight. And I've got to tell you, like, if I'm always, I will never let anything, and you've got this on radio, I just don't want anything to get in the way of that will compromise that relationship I have with my family. Like, it means more to me, the more space, like it's so important. And I think it's really, and I think a lot of people take themselves almost too seriously with the whole hustle thing and the business thing, because at the end of the day, that ends. That does end, and you really, and it's the family and your friends and your kids and all of that sort of stuff. That's the stuff that remains and lasts. So I think it's really important that people look up occasionally from the computer and just look more space for light, man.
Yeah, Dan, thank you very, very much for sharing those sentiments. I think if there's a couple of nuggets there in our dialogue today, aside from some of the suggestions and some of the stories you have about your background and experience and love of prototyping and just letting it all hang out there and not being afraid to fail, or looking at all experiences and thinking how to pivot and learn from them. It's been very refreshing to hear you say that. And also, again, you're part of that crowd that's preaching to the right audience. Like, I love hearing somebody that's putting their family first and wanting to maximize and get the most utility out of that relationship and spending time with them. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, and let me just say one little tidbit here. So I really appreciate that you're values led. That's the thing that really resonated with me.
Oh, thanks, man.
That's what will stay with me. But now I just have to ask. This is the last utterance of Lee. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? Well, in my Jeff Bezos garage, you can find me most nights. So you can go to our new website, which I'm so super proud of, morespaceforlight.com.au. So that's morespaceforlight.com.au. There's also Instagram, and our Instagram strategy is pretty honest. We basically use it as a blog to document our life and what we're up to. That's again at More Space for Light. LinkedIn and Medium, and on Medium, instead of FOR, it's the number 4, and we're prolific on LinkedIn as well. So please connect, say good day. We're also on the Slack channels. There's a fabulous community of people on Slack, and that's how we all got to know each other. So yeah, so keep doing great things, and please say good day. Good day.
Good day.
Good day.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Cut.
On behalf of the Experiences of Insight team, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. We hope that it was value added and that you continue to check out our content. Have a nice day.